Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 28th of August of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, we have significant changes on the ground, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the South Donetsk direction, where the Russians continue improving their positions, and according to information we have, this morning the armed forces of Russian Federation began full-scale offensive operations towards the city of Ugledar and towards the village of Vadiana. Currently the Russians are trying to bypass the move through the city, let's say along the western routes of attack, and the Russians are trying to enter Vadiana from the northeastern part, trying to cut the village of Vadiana itself with the Ukrainian positions in the villages like Katerinovka, Antonovka, Elizavetovka. At least we don't have any geolocations that can confirm this. The only thing we have is the report of the deep state pro-Ukrainian sources. They reported the armed forces of the Russian Federation are trying to attack Vuhledar from the flanks. Currently, we still haven't received anything that can confirm this information, but as for the Russian sources and pro-Russian sources, they have already begun adjusting the map, and according to pro-Russian sources, as a result of clashes during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to capture the tree lines and the fortifications right in front of Vadiana itself. So basically, as for the northwestern flank, the Russians managed to reach the village of Vadiana from this direction, and if this information correct, that means that this upcoming night the Russians will try to enter the village and to capture this territory. If the Russians are able to do this, then we can start counting days when the forces Ukraine garrison Ugledar will be forced to fall back from these positions towards the city of Bagayavlenka. This is the next city in the South Donetsk direction that is under complete Ukraine control. As for the geolocations, we have some. In this video, for example, we can see the process how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions in the village of Vadiana in the southern part. So we consider that this is something like artillery preparation before the Russian attack that gave them the additional gains on the ground. So first the Russians were bombing the territory under Ukraine control with the tall flamethrower systems, and after that the Russians sent FPV drones in this direction with the purpose to clear the trenches and the fortifications. So the next step is the ground operation. Furthermore, during the day, the Russians were bombing the main logistic hub between Bagayavlenka itself and the Vuhledar agglomeration. The Russians were bombing warehouses, bases, and the most important equipment, communication equipment, and we know that Ukrainians have a very big problems with this. Now let's move further and let's talk about Konstantinovka. The battle for Konstantinovka has ended, and we have a lot of geolocations that confirm this. First, this is one of the most interesting geolocation, and basically in this video we can see the Ukrainians, the last Ukrainian soldiers who were running away from Konstantinovka after very heavy clashes that had been taking place for probably 6 months or something like this. The Ukrainians left Konstantinovka, and most likely they left Konstantinovka forever. The Russian sources published the video how the Russian soldiers raised the Russian flag in the most western part of the village, and now we have no doubts, as well as nobody have doubts, that the Russians control Konstantinovka, at least the southern part, for 100%. Most likely the Ukrainians still have their possessions in the Garden Association Shakhtar, but due to the Russian significant progress, most likely the Ukrainians will be forced to fall back towards the village of Antonovka in the very near future. Now let's move to not to the Pokrovsk direction, because I don't think we should call this area as a Pokrovsk direction. It's better to call this area the Pokrovsk miracle, because I can't find any other words that can explain the situation on the ground. It's a miracle. I'm telling you, because since the beginning of the special military operation we haven't been seeing such a Russian progress, such a fast Russian movements, never. So we haven't seen anything like that before. So this is for the first time when the Russians are advancing, and we see that the Ukrainians can't slow down the Russians. The Russians are moving so fast, so that sometimes I have a feeling that maybe there are some kind of hidden negotiations or hidden agreement between Zelensky, secret agreement between Zelensky and Putin, that maybe Zelensky accepted the Russian demand to withdraw positions in Donbass, Lugansk regions, and so on. If you remember, a few months ago, Putin, gave us his demands to Ukraine if Ukraine wants to start peace negotiations. And if we take a look at the situation on the ground, it seems that Zelensky decided to follow Putin's demand, and now he's doing everything as was required for him. The Ukrainian forces basically show no resistance to the Russians. Now let's talk about different front lines, and first let's talk about Karlovka and Myrnohrad. Just yesterday we got reports that the Russians entered the village of Myrnohrad, and that was reported by different mappers, including pro-Russian, pro-neutral and pro-Ukrainian, and today we got the video with the Russian flag in the most central building of the village. Based on this video we have adjusted the map, but as you can see we haven't adjusted the entire village. I think that we need more details, more geolocations to color the entire village. We have no doubts that the village was captured by the Russians, but it's better to wait for additional geolocations. And according to different sources, the Russians moved even further in the southern direction and captured the entire Myrnohrad itself, and the Russians captured the stronghold that located to the south of the village. And this information was confirmed by pro-Ukrainian state mappers Deep State. And as for the Russian sources, the Russians reported about additional progress on the ground by the Russian forces, but the Russians were saying that additional progress was spotted of the sabotage and reconnaissance group of the armed force of Russian Federation. And according to information we have, the first Russian groups, the first Russian troops and soldiers entered the village of Lisovka, and they're trying, and they're let's say created something like a foothold, and the Russian forces are waiting when the regular army is going to come to these lines as well. And as soon as the Russians are able to get Lisovka, the Russian forces will begin assault operation towards Ukrainsk. Now let's talk about Karlovka, and of course if the Russians are able to take under control Ukrainsk, Lisovka and the landfills around, if the Russians are going to intensify their activity in the vicinity of Georgievka, Maximilianovka and Krasnogorovka, of course we can make a conclusion that most likely the Russians do have such a plan, like to create a cauldron for the Ukrainians who are currently located in this space between the villages of Karlovka, Galysovka, Krasnogorovka itself, and Nivoyska. I'm not sure about the real number of Ukrainian forces that are currently located in this direction, but probably a few thousand soldiers may be encircled by the Russians in the very near future. Now let's move further. While the Russian soldiers and forces are moving on the ground, the Russian FPV drones are moving further, creating more and more death roads all over the entire Pokrovsk direction. Today we got another death road between the village of Tsukurne and Hirnik that was under complete Russian control. A few more vehicles and trucks were attacked by the Russian FPV drones and they were destroyed. So we see that one of the main problems that Ukrainians suffer in this direction is complete gap and complete lack of vehicles, just regular vehicles that they can use for a deployment of forces, for evacuation, just to bring food and water. And this is one of the biggest problems the Ukrainian forces suffer in this direction. The Ukrainians lost hundreds of vehicles in the Kursk area, and most likely they concentrated everything there. And now when they have these problems, they don't know for sure how to resolve the issue. But according to information we have, for example, the Baltic states, Lithuania decided to send the cars that were taken from civilians who were captured drunk when they were driving a car. So according to information we have, the Lithuania, Latvia is going to send up to 20 vehicles. The total cost of them is $155,000 or euros or something like this. So now the countries are going to send not just Bradleys, Abrams and the Challengers tanks and F-16s, they will send just regular vehicles and just regular cars of those who were captured drunk driving on the roads of European Union or something like this. Now let's move to Selydove, the most interesting and the most covered with fog of war area. As you can see, we have a lot of geolocations, not a lot of geolocations, we have a lot of icons. As for the geolocations, we haven't received even a single geolocation from the city of Selydove. We have just one geolocation from the landfill of the coal mine by the name of Russia, and in this video we can see very heavy clashes on the top of the landfill. The sources are saying that he is filming a very heavy battle between the Russian soldiers and the Ukrainians, and the Russians were, during this video, the Russians were trying to capture the landfill completely. Later we got reports and updates from pro-Ukrainian, pro-Russian sources that the Russians managed to capture the landfill, and right after the Russians captured the landfill, they decided not to stop, not to slow down, and they began full-scale offensive operations toward the village of Mikhailovka and Selydove itself. And the Russians were attacking the city from the east and of course from the northeast. And as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to capture a lot of territories inside of the city itself. So let's discuss about details. The pro-Russian sources reported that the village of Mikhailovka is almost under complete Russian control. Around 40–50% was already captured as a result of one attack. Other sources reported that the Russians are getting even deeper and that the very heavy clashes already in the territory of the city of Selydove. Other Russian sources reported that the Russian armed forces have completely cleared Mira Street in the city of Selydove in the Pokrovsky direction. If we go on map and we will try to find the city, the street of Mir, we will find this street here. So if this information is correct, that means that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over the coal mine and over the tericon that belongs to this coal mine. And later we got reports that this is the correct information. The Russian armed forces are currently storming the village of Selydove. In the morning, the waste heap of the Russia mine was taken near the highway to the Krasnoarmeysk, point 295, and part of the village of Mikhailovka along Centralny Street. At the moment, an assault is underway in the direction of Karachenka mine, point 248. This is Karachenka mine and this is the coal mine of this. So according to some Russian sources, this mine was captured by the Russians by the evening of the 28th of August. Later we got additional details, and Gromova Street in Selydove was captured by the Russians. If we go back on map, this is the Gromova Street, this is it, between the street of Sindra Vulitsa Street and Lysychanska. So this small line, so the edge Russian positions were along this line. We don't know for sure where exactly, but obviously Lysychanska Street was captured, Miru Street was captured, and the Russians began battle for Sidna Street. Furthermore, additional sources reported that as a result of offensive operation from the northeastern direction, the Russians managed to significantly improve their positions and to capture the stadium. This is the football stadium, and the let's say the palace of sport. So these two buildings, these two constructions were captured by the Russians. So summarizing everything, we can draw a line, and according to information we have, according to the reports from pro-Russian sources, neutral sources, from many sources that today were publishing updates about the situation in Selydove, everything that located to the right or to the east of this red line, this one, was captured by the Russians just during the day, starting from the evening of 27th of August till the evening of 28th of August. Obviously, the Ukrainians show no resistance, and the most important, if the Russians did capture the landfill, that means that Ukrainians are no longer able to hold their positions in the central part. Most likely, they would be forced to fall back as far as possible. Furthermore, the Russians are saying that, of course, there are very big number of prisoners of war that the Russians managed to capture during the battles for different villages, and the Russians are saying that the average age of soldiers of armed forces of Ukraine is 55 plus. So as I understand, these are recently mobilized soldiers who are very low motivated, who doesn't know basically how to fight, and this is the reason why they're surrendering, why they're giving up every single square meter, and more territories are coming under complete Russian control. If the situation continues, most likely during the next video, during the next 12 hours, the Russians will capture the central part of Selydove, and then we can say that the Ukrainian armed forces of Ukraine of the Pokrovsk direction are defeated by the Russian attack, completely defeated. And after the battle of Selydove, nobody, neither Zelensky, neither Putin, neither Gerasimov, the head of Russian army, knows for sure where exactly the Ukrainians are able to stop the Russians. And there are very high chances that the next stop is the Dnipro River. Now let's move further and let's talk about Grodovka direction, because we have lots of very interesting updates from this territory as well. During the day we got just few geolocations from the northwestern part of the city. In this video we can see Ukrainian FPV drones were bombing the Russian forces, which confirms Russian presence in this part of the city, and based on this video we have adjusted the map. According to different sources, the Russians captured the city of Novogrodovka completely without no doubts about this and something like this. This information was confirmed by different mappers, including pro-Ukrainian. But the problem is that since the beginning of the battle for Novogrodovka, we still haven't received even a single geolocation from the city itself, that confirms Russian presence. Maybe there are Russians and maybe the city was captured and probably was captured, but just keep in your mind that still no flags, no Russian troopers, no assault troopers inside of Novogrodovka. Nothing like this was posted during the previous 24 hours and since the beginning of the battle. Now let's move further. According to information we have, the Russians managed to significantly improve their positions in the area between the Novogrodovka itself and Krutoy Yar and Krasny Yar. So the sources reported that the Russians, somewhere at noon time of the local time, at noon time of Ukrainian time, managed to establish complete control over everything below this red line. This landfill was captured, the village of Krutoy Yar was captured, the village of Krasny Yar was captured. Later we got geolocation from the road between Novogrodovka and Grodovka. This video was published by the 71st Jaeger Brigade. In this video we can can see how the Ukrainians were bombing and attacking the edge Russian positions, which confirms additional Russian progress, and we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. Also, we have reports that the Russians improved their positions completely in the city of Grodovka, and the city was captured, and everything that located on this side of the river and the river of Zhuravka was captured by the Russians completely. So everything starting from Novotoretskaya till the landfill in the northeastern part of Novogrodovka was captured. So everything along this red line. But these are not the only updates about the situation in this direction. The most important update is that very reliable Russian source reported that at 3 p.m. of the local time, the Russian armed forces advanced into Selydove. We've discussed this, and the Russians entered Myrnohrad, future Dimitrov. So we don't know for sure where exactly the Russians managed to enter the city of Myrnohrad, but once again, according to very reliable pro-Russian sources, the first Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group entered the city, the Pokrovsk agglomeration. Currently, there are very heavy clashes exactly for this territory. So the Russians are trying to dig in deeper, they're creating ambushes, and they try to destroy as many as possible Ukrainian soldiers' positions. And if this information is correct, if the Russians are able to hold their positions for upcoming night, then this is going to be complete disaster and another evidence that Ukrainian armed forces, the group of forces Pokrovsk, the group was completely defeated in this area. I don't know how the Ukrainians are going to stabilize the situation, but the only thing I know for sure that Zelensky reported that the Pokrovsk front line collapsed completely, and the only solution how to save the situation to begin the redeployment process from the Kursk direction to the Pokrovsk. But according to information we have, Zelensky refused this proposal and he ordered to continue clashes in this area. So as you can see, the situation is very difficult. Nobody knows for sure how the Zelensky and Ukraine is going to resolve all these problems. But as I understand, basically there is no solution for this situation. Now let's move further. Let's talk about the New York, Novgorodskaya, Toretsk agglomerations. There are very heavy clashes in this area, but as I see, according to geolocations, according to everything we've been receiving for the previous few days, we can say and we can make conclusion that most likely the Russians reduce the activities and reduce the clashes in this area from their side, maybe because they are a little bit exhausted, maybe they redeployed some forces and reinforcements to Toretsk, or maybe the Russians reached the wall, defense wall, that they need to wait some time to break this defense wall through. We are talking about the prison, we are talking about the landfill, we are talking about the citadels inside of Toretsk itself. The only thing we got during the previous 24 hours is the number of FPV drone attacks on the Russian positions between the city of Toretsk and the city of Pivnichne. Based on this video, we have adjusted the map and added additional territory on the complete Russian control. Now let's move further. As for Chasiv Yar, nothing special, just regular activity. As for the Siversk direction, we have interesting updates. And first of all, the Ukrainians managed to restore their positions in the village of Ivana Daryevka. This village was captured a few months ago, and it was confirmed by the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation. But most likely, the Russians couldn't hold their positions there due to very comfortable positions of Ukrainians a bit further in the northern direction, and the Ukrainians basically forced the Russians to fall back. And now the Russians are bombing the Ukrainians once again. So we have adjusted the map in Ukraine's favor. Now let's talk about Verkhnyokamyanskaya. As you can see, we have adjusted the map. The Russians probably captured the stronghold between the village of Verkhnyokamyanskaya and Lysychansk oil refinery, and the Russians were trying to dig in deeper. The Ukrainians of the 54th Mechanized Brigade published a video of how they were FPV droning the Russians in this area. Most likely, the Ukrainians will conduct a series of counterattacks with the purpose to force the Russians to fall back. So let's wait for additional updates, but as for now, we have colored 50% of the stronghold under complete Russian control. Another 50% is in the gray zone, as you can see. Now let's talk about the Kupiansk direction. We have additional changes on the ground. We don't have changes, we have confirmation of control over contested area. The Ukrainian sources published the video of how they were bombing and attacking the Russians in the vicinity of Pischane, northern Pischane, and this video confirms the Russian presence in these positions, and the Russian control over this position, and furthermore control over the stronghold that located to the east. So Anyway, there are still a lot of contested area, a lot of contested zones here, like further in direction of Tabaevka, further in direction of Oskol River. So there are still lots of geolocations. It's better to get to color the map. But anyway, we see that the Russians are moving and they're providing additional confirmed information. Now let's talk about the Kursk direction. The Kursk offensive, at least as for the 28th of August, was stopped completely by the Ukrainians. No changes on the ground, no movements. The only thing that we been receiving during the day from the Kursk direction is the significant number of FPV drone attacks and FPV drone strikes on Ukrainian vehicles. Lots of tanks, lots of personnel carriers, lots of vehicles, lots of equipment were destroyed as a result of Russian FPV drone attacks and as a result of artillery strikes. The Ukrainians suffer significant losses. All this equipment, of course, is required somewhere in the Pokrovsk area, but the Ukrainians decided to destroy everything here, and everything will be destroyed. The Ukrainians haven't managed to create additional infrastructure here, additional equipment that can cover this territory. They haven't managed to create additional trenches in the fortifications, and that's why they are suffering losses. And furthermore, according to information we have, Zelensky is sending more and more forces, and he is going to dig in deeper, as deep as possible. He's not going to surrender. He is not going to stop the clashes. Furthermore, the Russians began a counter-offensive in some direction. We have some changes on the ground. We got the video from the city of Korenivo, from the southeastern part. The video was published by the 25th 225th Brigade of Armored Forces of Ukraine. In this video, we can see how the Ukrainians were FPV droning the Russian forces inside of the Korenivo. We see the Russian soldiers who were moving from one building to another. This video confirms that this part of the buildings was already under Russian control, so we have adjusted the map. This video confirms that the Russians were clearing the southeastern part of the Korenivo, of the city of Korenivo, and most likely during the next upcoming night they will try to expand their positions and to secure the southeastern part completely, which will force the Ukrainians to fall back further the Lyubimov, Krasnagas, and so on. As for Glushkova area, we haven't received anything, just additional photo satellite pictures of the very good quality of Russian pontoon bridges all over the entire river of Seym. So if the Ukrainians are going to begin offensive tomorrow, currently the Russians have no problems with logistic. We have interesting updates that are coming from the northern Chernigov area. According to information we have, the Ukrainians began concentration of their forces in this part of Ukraine, and the sources are saying that Ukrainians may try to attack the Russians in this area, and the main purpose and the main reason of this attack, of course, is to cut the pipelines. You know that the Ukrainians wants to control the Russian gas and oil logistic, Russian gas and oil support of Ukraine, including through Belarus and so on. And one of the pipelines, gas pipelines, is going through this region, and the Ukrainians may try to capture and then to begin blackmail of Russia or something like this. So this is probably one of the reasons that Ukrainians are planning to do. Furthermore, we got additional updates of Ukrainian attacks all over the entire Russia. More drone attacks everywhere, and currently the Ukrainians are trying to destroy as many as possible oil depots. And during the previous 24 hours, lots of oil depots were destroyed as a result of Ukrainian drone strikes. For example, in this video we can see how 2 oil reservoirs were burning, and later we got reports that a few more oil fuel depots were set on fire as a result of this fire. So I'm not saying that the situation is critical for Russia, but every single day we get another video how the Ukrainians destroying this or that oil or fuel depot. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.